Next, from Springfield, we talked to Dave Lundy, a spokesperson for the Best Coalition, about why his organization opposes the so-called ComEd bill, which would use state funds to subsidize 2 nuclear power plants in Illinois. This runs about 20 minutes.
Dave Lundy, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois channel. Before I begin, let me tell the viewers that you are a member of our board, but in your normal life, you're also engaged in public policy matters, and you're engaged in one of the major pieces of legislation going through the fall veto session, what is often referred to as the ComEd bill. You are in opposition to it. What is the issues that you have with the bill?
Well, I run a coalition called the Best Coalition. We are composed of businesses, consumer groups, energy companies that are deeply concerned about the $11 billion bailout that's currently contemplated for nuclear plants, as well as even the energy efficiency pieces that sound great, but are actually a vehicle to put another couple $1 billion in guaranteed profits into ComEd's coffers. The challenge is that these nuclear facilities are not needed. Our state has 41% more power than we need. Our demand is actually shrinking, not growing. And so Illinois has competitive markets. They were advocated for by ComEd and Exelon 20 years ago, with the theory being that it will help lower energy prices. It's done so, which is one of the only competitive advantages that Illinois has for attracting businesses, is lower energy prices. So many of our allies in this fight are people like the Manufacturers Association and the Chemical Industry Council, as well as AARP and the Attorney General's Office, all of whom recognize this is a very, very bad bill and definitely shouldn't be done in 2 days of veto session down in Springfield. I mean, literally, they have dropped 3 different bills. We're actually now waiting for amendments 8 and 9. And as of Monday, we had Amendment 1. So literally, these things are coming out every couple hours. You've got to analyze them. And the devil, Terry, is in the details. And what we keep finding every time they disclose language for these bills, we find these things that are just terrible for ratepayers.
You know, say for the viewers, just to follow up on your comments, yeah, this keeps moving, and as I said to you off camera, I'm not really familiar with it because unless it's someone like yourself who's dedicated solely to paying attention, it is changing the landscape on this legislation so radically from time to time that what's also interesting is politically, some of the people that would normally be your allies are now with ComEd, and some of the people that would normally be on the other side of the issue with you or with you. And so it's a strange mix, and why it's also fascinating, but as you say, very important bill that could mean, I don't know, billions of dollars over the course of this contract or the deal that would be put together. One of the things people say, let me have you address this. They say we shouldn't do a deal with ComEd, which is owned by Exelon, in part because they say the corporation of Exelon is making billions of dollars in profit, and they don't need the money to be subsidizing, or we shouldn't be subsidizing their plants. But others would say, if I'm running 5 retail stores, let's say 5 hamburger shops, and 2 of them are losing money, I would still close those down, even if I'm making a profit on the rest of them. Why would that argument not hold water in this case?
Well, no, actually it does hold water, which is that, okay, close them down. If you're losing money, close them down. And here's the thing. Exelon for decades in this state argued with people who wanted to get subsidies to do things like the Future Gen plant or the Taylorville project or any of a number of things. And Exelon always said, you know what, you live or die based on the market. If your plant can survive in the market, then so be it. You should go ahead and build it. If not, you shouldn't. That was Exelon that led all of those fights against everybody else who wanted subsidies. So they were great with having no subsidies when it benefited them. Then suddenly the energy markets changed because of fracking, and the low natural gas prices have driven down the price of electricity in our state.
So their competition, the fossil fuel generators, as compared to nuclear, can now undercut their prices.
Exactly. And suddenly when they become stressed, they turn around and say, oh, well, it's not fair that we don't get subsidies for our carbon-free attributes, and we should have those subsidies. And we're like, well, we were paying attention to what you said last year and the year before. So as somebody who's been dealing with these guys for more than a decade, I can tell you the hypocrisy is really, really astonishing.
What about the argument that, one of the plants is in Clinton? It's a small community in central Illinois. It's a major taxpayer supporting the schools, and then you have the same argument, I would think, up in the Quad Cities where you have the other plant. What about the argument that the cost of closing these down, the loss of tax revenues over X period of years, that it's worth subsidizing them to keep the employment, the tax base, et cetera?
That's a great question. So the taxes that the plant pays in Clinton are $13 million a year. To Clinton, that would be devastating. So let's find a way to fill those tax holes. But this bill is going to cost the average Illinoisan, well, not the average Illinoisan, but this bill is going to cost $850 million a year. You don't need to have an $850 million bill to pay them $13 million. There are funds available that could be tapped in order for that purpose. We are strongly in favor. In fact, I shared a draft of a bill with Senator Nybo yesterday of a community transition plan. But the idea that the General Assembly can hold back the tides of the market when things have changed so dramatically, it's just not realistic over the long haul. And the problem is, as demand continues to shrink, you're going to have more and more excess capacity in our state, and that means those subsidies are going to have to grow if you want to keep those plants online. Simply put,
those subsidies not capped?
Well, they're capped today at $235 million, but it's not hard to come back to the General Assembly and say, oh, well, we have a structure, we just need you to change this percentage, and then voila, there's another $1 billion. So they are desperate to get a broad-based subsidy for their nuclear fleet. I understand that, but I'm sorry, guys. You want to live or die by the market, you have to live or die by the market. And the other thing is that what winds up happening is as we pay more in these subsidies to keep these plants open, and we're exporting 41% of our power and that number is growing, that means people in Illinois are going to pay more so people in neighboring states can pay less for their electricity. That just doesn't make any sense. Electricity is one of the only competitive advantages we have, and we need to keep it that way.
So, to be clear, you're saying the capacity versus the use in Illinois, that we're generating 140%. In other words, we got 40%
Correct.
Excess capacity, and so they're selling that juice on the market.
Correct, and they're selling it on the market, and it's 40% of it's going out of state.
Has anyone discussed saying, if we're going to subsidize you, then we want to share in the profits? If you're selling 40% on the market, then do some kind of a profit share, so that if you're losing money, you got the subsidy. If you're making money, we'll share in the benefit.
Terry, I love how you think. It's funny you mention that, because one of our complaints with the last version of the bill and the version before it was that it didn't take into account how power plants actually work and how the market actually works. So power plants make money in all kinds of ways, and they often will sell direct bilateral contracts with other states. Exelon recently sold 800 megawatts, which is almost the size of the Clinton plant, to Ohio for 3 years for almost double what they get here in Illinois. Those revenues would not have counted against their subsidy. So there are all kinds of avenues for revenues that they just don't count. It's like if you went to a McDonald's and you say, well, what's your revenue picture? And they gave you the amount they make for fries and hamburgers, but they didn't tell you about their shakes and everything else. And that's the way they're trying to play it, and this is what these guys do. We've been down this block again and again and again, and the problem is when you dump a 500-plus page bill on members of the General Assembly and say, okay, you've got 20 minutes to analyze it, we're going to have a committee hearing in 20 minutes, which, by the way, is exactly what happened yesterday, and then they're going to dump another and another and a number. You can't expect everybody to be able to digest all of this quickly. That's the biggest problem. That's, thankfully, why editorial boards around the state have all come out against this.
I was going to bring up this very point. When you have a bill this complex, in fact, earlier today at a committee hearing, Senator Don Harmon, who's one of the Democratic Senate leaders, is not a dumb man by any measure.
One of the smartest men in the General Assembly.
Yeah, he's does his homework but he was grappling with trying to understand the details because of the terminology. I mean, it's not the kind of thing where you're naming a post office after somebody. This is layers and layers and layers of complexity, which I don't mean to argue one way or the other on the issue, but to say the way we pass legislation sometimes is something that we might want to consider as far as why do we have to pass something that complex in such a short amount of time is perhaps a comment.
Well, and in fact, I was in that hearing, I testified at that hearing, and Senator Harman was just trying to get the folks from ComEd and Exelon to explain their bill. And they struggled for more than an hour to explain, well, how do these rate caps work that supposedly you have in there? And we came up and explained that, in fact, they're circumventing the rate caps in various ways. But look, if you are a proponent of something and you can't explain it, then maybe you don't understand your own bill well enough. And maybe we shouldn't be trying to rush through this. And let's see, it's now 4 hours left in session, and we hear there are 2 more amendments coming. This is no way to run a railroad.
You know, lastly, let me just say, the Illinois Retail Merchants Association, which had always been against the ComEd deal, came out with a statement, I believe yesterday afternoon, might have been this morning, in favor of it. You're saying the manufacturers, which I haven't had a chance to touch base with, are against it, is that
manufacturers, the Chamber, the Tooling and Manufacturing Association, the Chemical Industry Council, the Petroleum Council.
Let me just say, normally IRMA, the retailers, and the manufacturers are in lockstep with it.
Correct.
Again, we talked earlier about the odd political, it's almost like a break on a pool table, the way the politics work here. What accounts for IRMA being for it, if you know, and the manufacturers being against it? In both cases, they were concerned about the cost to their membership.
Right. So I would never want to speak for another association.
I was going to say, I'm asking you an unfair question because I'm asking you to speak, but maybe if you
can speak to their members. Because one of the things that my coalition has done pretty effectively, we have energy experts, we have consultants, we are constantly modeling every potential change that ComEd or Exelon is proposing. And so we've modeled this for their members. This is going to kill their members. It's terrible. 60% of the ratepayers in Illinois are in the commercial and industrial class under 10 megawatts. And that's the class that most of the IRMA members are in. This is going to cost some of these members hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in extra cost. And you think about that, you know, the people in that rate class also include your hospitals and your schools and your school district. We did an analysis. We found this is going to cost the Chicago Public Schools $2.5 million a year. City of Chicago more than $5 million a year, and on and on and on. It's our understanding one of the reasons that the governor was initially hesitant, because he got a lot of pressure from school boards who were like, we have no more money. The cupboard's bare. What are you doing? So I don't want to speculate why IRMA is for this bill. We think that that they're mistaken in the analysis. And I'll say one other thing about the cost issue. So what IRMA will say, and they'll cite this report that they did and the reports that were in the state about 2 years ago that came out called the Section 11, or the Resolution 1146 reports, that claim if you shut these plants, prices will go way, way up. Turns out, though, we've analyzed those as well, and those reports were based on assumptions that have proven over time to be completely false. So they assumed natural gas prices would be as high as $7.65, and natural gas prices are $2.80. So you've overstated the impact dramatically, and then they also said you're going to have to replace 100% of the plant's power. Well, in a 41% surplus market, no, you don't have to replace 100%. The demand isn't growing, it's shrinking. And in fact, the authors of the report, of the 1146 report, put language in the foreword, and they did it specifically so that Exelon couldn't abuse the reports, which hasn't stopped them. But the language said these reports are based on, or these analyses are based on specific assumptions. Each analysis is based on specific assumption, and if those assumptions change, the analysis has to change as well. And they have changed dramatically.
So, as we close out, let me just say, what accounts for the energy going down in the state, usage? And secondly, what about the argument that, we've had a relatively flat economic growth over the last 10 years. Hopefully that changes. one would think that would generate a lot more electrical demand. So what about the argument that says we might have 40% excess capacity now, but we still have to have that excess capacity so we have room to grow?
Well, we have excess capacity, and the excess capacity has been growing, not shrinking. The demand is shrinking for two reasons. One, it's shrinking because we're all becoming more efficient. Your appliances are more efficient. You buy Energy Star appliances. Your light bulbs are no longer incandescent. They're mostly LEDs or compact fluorescents. Businesses have been investing hundreds of millions of dollars every year in energy efficiency programs because for many of these large businesses, energy is the largest expense they have. So demand is going down because we're all becoming more efficient. We built this electrical system for a different economy that was far less efficient. So we just simply don't need all of the plants that are currently out there. The other thing that this morning Mark Beal from the Chemical Industry Council testified in hearing, he said, look, the competitive markets in Illinois are working great. There's a natural gas plant that's going to be built off of their own balance sheet. They're not asking ratepayers for money. And it's going to replace the Clinton plant in terms of the size. Now, it's not needed to replace Clinton in that way because we have so much excess power, but the markets can take care of this. I know you're a markets guy, and so you appreciate this, and our roles are normally reversed since I'm the Democrat and you assume I don't understand markets, but in fact, in energy, I understand markets quite well. And so we think we'll be better off if Illinois preserves its competitive markets.
All right, Dave Lundy, thanks so much. It's a complex issue. We appreciate you shining some light on it.
I appreciate you taking the time.